My name is Evelyn May Parker, and I was 26 years old when I learned that your own family can steal your entire life without ever laying a finger on you. That day, I had just been discharged from the hospital after emergency surgery, and my body was still incredibly weak. I could barely walk, and all I wanted was to collapse into my own familiar bed in the very first apartment I had ever paid for myself here in California. But when I unlocked the door, the entire place was completely empty, looking exactly like a cleared-out model unit. Absolutely everything was gone, from my work computer to the sofa. I, but the most agonizing part was realizing that my priceless keepsakes had vanished too, especially the silver necklace and the old 19. I called my mother in a state of absolute sheer panic, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone against my ear. Instead of asking if I was okay or showing any concern, she just let out a cold, mocking laugh. She told me I was playing make-believe and that she was simply cleaning up my little independent fantasy. She casually admitted that she and my dad had sold off everything of value, from my furniture to the expensive design equipment I used to make a living. They even took my childhood memory boxes, tossing away the irreplaceable photos like they were nothing but garbage. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit when she revealed exactly how they had managed to pull this off so fast. They had actually gone to my landlord and told him that I had tragically passed away from sudden surgical complications. They used my fake death as the perfect excuse to clear out the apartment immediately, playing the role of devastated, grieving parents. The betrayal was so deep and sickening that my mind couldn't even process the sick words coming out of her mouth. When I started screaming and begging for them to return my belongings, she simply hung up the phone without another word. I immediately tried calling back again and again, but the calls wouldn't go through at all. Within minutes, I realized that my own parents had blocked my number and erased me from their lives entirely. 3 years later, I received a phone call at 5 in the morning from my younger brother Lucas, and his voice was completely breaking as he sobbed uncontrollably through the receiver. He begged me to stop everything that was happening, crying that our mother was having a massive panic attack and had to be hospitalized, while our father, Dr. Ethan Parker, was experiencing a complete and utter mental breakdown. Before I tell you exactly why my so-called family was suddenly falling apart and why I refused to make anything stop, I want you to drop a comment below letting me know where you are watching this video from and what time it is right now. I truly want to know how far this story can travel across the internet, because I hope it reaches anyone who might be dealing with a similar toxic family situation. What happened on that day, and everything that followed, taught me a brutal but necessary lesson that I will never forget for the rest of my life. It showed me that some people will only treat you like family when they are backed into a corner and need you to forgive them for the exact things they chose to destroy. He just kept crying into the phone and expecting me to suddenly step back into the role of the obedient daughter, comforting him while ignoring the 3 years of dead silence I had endured. But I was no longer the weak, broken 26-year-old girl who had been left with nothing but a hospital bracelet and an empty apartment. That first horrific night after being discharged from the hospital, I had absolutely nowhere else to go, so I had to sleep on a cramped, uncomfortable sofa in the small apartment of my best friend Chloe Davis. The only worldly possessions I had left to my name were a flimsy plastic bag holding my hospital discharge papers and the sweaty clothes I was wearing when I had originally collapsed and been rushed to the emergency room for surgery. As a freelance architectural designer, my entire livelihood depended entirely on the high-end computer and the backup hard drives that my parents had so casually packed up and sold off to strangers, meaning I was instantly stripped of my sole source of income and my hard-earned professional reputation. My most loyal clients began dropping me one by one, completely abandoning our ongoing contracts because all of their sensitive project files and detailed blueprints had been stolen right along with my expensive electronic equipment. I tried desperately to explain the bizarre truth to the people I worked with, but no one could comprehend the absolutely insane reality of the situation I was trapped in, because normal parents simply do not fake their own daughter's death just to steal a living room sofa and a work laptop. I was completely paralyzed by the overwhelming stress of losing my entire career overnight, while my surgical stitches were still fresh and my exhausted body was actively fighting off the lingering infection from my emergency medical. The horrifying true scale of their massive deception only came to light when an extended family member sent me a frantic, terrifying text message, practically begging to know if I was actually. I soon discovered that my parents had orchestrated an elaborate and completely fabricated mourning campaign all over their social media accounts, targeting their wealthy, status-obsessed community in the upscale neighborhood of Calabasas with a highly polished performance of unbearable grief. They had shamelessly accepted generous financial donations, handwritten sympathy cards, and free charity meals from their naive neighbors, who truly believed they were comforting a grieving couple that had just lost their eldest child to a sudden, devastating medical tragedy. While I was barely surviving on a day-to-day basis, eating cheap, instant ramen and shivering under a borrowed blanket on Chloe's couch, my parents were being constantly coddled and financially rewarded for a horrific death that they had completely invented out of thin air. The very moment I finally managed to contact some relatives directly to expose their sickening lies, my parents immediately shifted their narrative without missing a single beat, claiming to everyone that my recent medical trauma had made me completely delusional and mentally unstable. In the short span of a single week, I went from being a tragically deceased daughter to an unstable, greedy child who was simply harassing her loving parents for attention. And the absolute worst part was that some gullible people actually believed their twisted, manipulative version of the story. Hoping for some immediate justice, I walked straight into the local police station carrying my hospital admission records, terrifying photos of my completely stripped apartment, and printed screenshots of my mother's dramatic social media posts announcing my fake death. I fully expected someone to look at this overwhelming mountain of evidence and immediately arrest them for grand theft. But the officer simply sighed and told me this was likely just a civil matter because my parents possessed a spare emergency key. The incredibly frustrating apathy of the legal system in that exact moment shifted my anger from a blazing, uncontrollable emotional rage into a deeply cold, highly focused, and incredibly permanent determination to legally destroy their perfect little lives. I completely stopped crying over my lost belongings, stopped asking why my own parents could do something so uniquely evil to their own flesh and blood, and simply started organizing every single text message, online receipt, and bank statement into neatly. I realized that they had chosen the perfect kind of cruelty, the kind that gets buried in endless bureaucratic paperwork while everyone around you constantly tells you to calm down and be reasonable. If you were ever put in my horrifying situation and the police completely refused to help you get your stolen life back, would you eventually give up or would you keep fighting? Please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, right now. Thanks to an incredibly generous personal loan from my best friend Chloe, I was finally able to afford a tough, no-nonsense attorney, and we officially launched a grueling civil lawsuit that dragged out over 2 miserable, financially exhausting years. Throughout the entire agonizing legal process, my parents continuously played the role of desperate victims, claiming in official court documents that they had only removed my belongings to protect me from my own supposed financial irresponsibility and highly erratic, unpredictable behavior. Their high-priced defense lawyer even had the unbelievable, absolute audacity to suggest to the judge that my memory of what I actually legally owned was severely compromised by the extremely strong pain medications I was taking during my post-surgical recovery, however. I completely crushed their pathetic, gaslighting defense by presenting a massive, heavy binder full of original purchase receipts, detailed bank statements, and a legally binding sworn written testimony from my landlord confirming they had explicitly told him I was dead. The seasoned judge sitting on the bench did not care about my mother's theatrical crying fits or my father's feigned, self-righteous outrage for a single second because the court only cared about hard, verifiable dates, irrefutable financial documents, and glaring contradictions in their fabricated timeline. When the final official judgment came down, the court unequivocally ruled in my favor, legally ordering my parents to pay me exactly $48,250 in full compensation for my stolen property, lost freelance income, and severe, ongoing emotional distress. After the massive civil judgment was completely finalized, my parents completely and arrogantly ignored the court order by refusing to pay a single dime of the money they legally owed me, so I immediately rejected their desperate, last-minute pleas to work out a quiet, private family settlement. Instead, I moved forward with unrelenting, aggressive legal enforcement, instructing my attorney to hit them exactly where it truly hurt the most by legally placing a heavy financial lien directly against their precious, perfectly manicured Calabasas home. I did not stop there because I also filed the necessary paperwork to aggressively garnish the wages directly from my father's prestigious medical paycheck, and the harsh, unavoidable reality of these sudden financial consequences spread like wildfire through his upscale workplace, severely damaging Dr. Ethan Parker's pristine professional reputation and prompting panicked phone calls from their mortgage lenders who suddenly realized the house was in serious jeopardy, while my mother faced her own incredibly humiliating public downfall when she was unceremoniously kicked off every single elite charity board in their neighborhood. Those wealthy neighbors had finally uncovered the undeniable, sickening truth about her fraudulent memorial fund and demanded to know why a grieving mother was suddenly having her assets seized by her allegedly deceased daughter. The devastating, crushing combination of these severe financial penalties and the undeniable public humiliation completely shattered the flawless, wealthy facade that my toxic family had spent decades meticulously building and aggressively defending, proving that lies are incredibly easy to tell when everyone is sad, but they become completely impossible to maintain when aggressive court orders and bank collection notices start arriving in the Daily Mail. I purposely let them sweat in absolute, terrifying panic for 4 straight days before I finally agreed to drive over to their pristine, perfectly manicured suburban house to have a face-to-face conversation entirely on my own terms. When I walked into the upscale living room, I immediately noticed they had cowardly invited two prominent neighbors from the local homeowners association to act as a neutral, sympathetic audience for their carefully rehearsed, tearful performance of parental victimhood. My father immediately stood up and arrogantly suggested that having neutral mediators present would somehow help our broken family move toward healing. Without hesitating for even a single second, I bluntly exposed the horrific fact that they had eagerly pocketed charity sympathy money for my fake funeral right in front of those very neighbors, causing the entire room to instantly fall into a deeply uncomfortable, heavy silence while the HOA members stared at my mother in absolute disgust. I then turned my intense attention to my younger brother Lucas, forcefully making him admit out loud that he had actively helped load my stolen, precious belongings into their garage without ever daring to speak up or stop them during those 3 long years. My panicked parents desperately tried to regain control of the rapidly crumbling narrative, angrily calling me a cruel, cold-hearted, and vindictive daughter who was maliciously and selfishly trying to destroy our once happy and respected family over a supposedly simple financial misunderstanding. I simply looked them dead in the eye and coldly fired back that they had permanently lost the right to call themselves my family because they had officially become complete strangers to me the very second they shamelessly told the entire world I was dead and buried just to steal my furniture. On a chilly spring morning, I deliberately parked my car across the street to watch as my parents were officially evicted by the bank. They were forced to helplessly load their boxes into a cheap rental truck and permanently relocate to a tiny apartment. I feel absolutely zero regret about what happened to them that day. I did not maliciously destroy this once respected family. I merely utilized the legal system to expose the deeply toxic rot that was already festering inside of it for years. Today, I have successfully rebuilt my architectural design business from the ground up. I am finally living peacefully in a secure new apartment, and I am surrounded by genuine friends who actually care about my well-being and protect my peace. Do you guys think I did the right thing by taking them to court, or was I too harsh for refusing to blindly forgive them for what they stole? Please share your honest thoughts down below, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories.